Today I want to talk about the case of Simon Levy, who very recently, just this week, was sentenced to a whole life order in prison. This is incredibly rare in the United Kingdom. I believe less than 100 people are serving whole life sentences currently, and he is now one of them. And while we will, of course, talk about the recent court case, that is not really what I want to focus on. I want to talk about the events that have led us to what has happened this week. Over the last 9 years, Simon Levy is believed to have sexually assaulted at least 11 women, and is believed to have murdered 2. These offences span nearly a decade, and while police have been made aware of his actions at many points, clearly not enough was done to intervene and stop him from being able to cause harm, and that is what I want to talk about today. As this is a page about sex work, it is also worth noting that at least 3 of Levy's victims are known to have been sex workers, including both of the murder victims. Our timeline begins in 2017, when Simon Levy is believed to have committed his first sexual assault. 1 year later, in November 2018, Levy sexually assaulted 2 different women in separate incidents. Victim 1, at a party in Camden, he put his hands inside her underwear and touched her vagina. And victim 2, a woman travelling to Notting Hill Carnival, he sexually assaulted her by penetration using his fingers. These 2 offences from November 2018 were his first 2 sexual assault convictions, although they didn't come until 2021. He received a 3-year prison sentence in 2021 and became subject to sex offender restrictions and monitoring. On top of this, the Met and the prosecutors asked the judge to impose a sexual harm prevention order, which would have placed strict limits on his activity upon release. The judge, however, refuses. In April 2022, while inside HMP Brixton, Levy sexually assaulted a female prison officer. She reported the assault the same day, but he was not interviewed by police about it until after he was released from prison. At the time, he received no punishment, although this assault did eventually become one of the 11 additional sexual assault charges obtained against him in this most recent trial. Levy was released on licence from prison in February of 2023. He was now a convicted sex offender, subject to sex offender monitoring, restrictions, and already known to have committed multiple sexual assaults. Yet he was released. In June 2023, a year and 2 months after the assault of the prison officer, he is finally questioned by police. Despite this questioning, and the fact there was CCTV evidence, he was not charged with this offence until October 2025, after the 2 murders had already occurred. This is now being described as one of the major failings in this case. I would say one of many. In October of 2023, Levy sexually assaults a woman on the London Underground. She reports it the same day, but he is not identified by British Transport Police for over 2 years. In May of 2024, the Met Police receive a third-party allegation of rape relating to Levy. He is arrested and returned to prison for breach of his licence, where he remains until the end of his sentence. But he is not charged with a new crime of rape. Just 3 months later, in August of 2024, Levy is released yet again from prison. At this point, the Met Police become the sole agency responsible for managing his risk of future offending. And for some reason, they decide to downgrade him from a high-risk offender to a medium risk, meaning a lower level of monitoring and contact with police. Between October and November of 2024, Levy sexually assaults a further 3 women on the London Underground in 2 separate incidents. One victim films him committing an assault on another victim. Levy is interviewed under caution by the British Transport Police, but he is not charged, even though, this time, the victims have him on camera. In January of 2025, Levy violently attacks a street-based sex worker and rapes her in a car park in Tottenham. This week, in court, at the reading of the verdict, the details of that violent attack were made public. The victim was raped both vaginally and anally, and beaten so hard her right shoulder was fractured. She was also suffocated to the point of unconsciousness. Within days, she is arrested by the police for breaching a community protection notice. She is, not him, her. While she is under arrest, she tells the police what had happened to her, and she provides a very good description of Levy and where he lives. However, the Met closes the investigation that same summer, having made limited attempts to speak to her further. That rape is investigated for less than 6 months. You have to wonder if it's due to the perceived credibility of the victim. Just 2 months later, on the 16th of March 2025, Levy commits his first murder, killing Carmenza Valencia Trujillo in a derelict flat in South London. Carmenza lived in southeast London. She was 53 years old. She was a mother and a grandmother, and she worked as a sex worker. Carmenza was killed in Wendover House on the Aylesbury estate in Walworth in southeast London. Wendover House was a largely condemned or mostly empty block of flats. Her body was discovered in the stairwell. Several weeks later, the local police arrest Levy on suspicion of murder after his DNA is found at the scene. He is released under investigation, but the case is not passed to the Met's Homicide Command and is not formally classed as murder. In April of 2025, Levy is reported to the British Transport Police for yet another sexual assault on the London Underground. He is charged with 5 sexual assaults and remanded in police custody. He appears in court and yet again is released on bail. Over the next 3 months, he commits several more sexual assaults on London Underground trains. He is arrested by British Transport Police and further charged, including for breach of bail. But a magistrate's court grants him bail yet again. That summer of 2025, he fails twice to attend Crown Court hearings, but both times arrest warrants are not issued. And in August of 2025, 5 months after his first murder, he murders again. Cheryl Wilkins in Tottenham. Cheryl Wilkins was 39 years old. She was a mother of 4, and she was a sex worker. She was murdered only a couple of days before her 40th birthday. At sentencing, the judge noted that she had suffered 83 injuries. CCTV captured Levy and Cheryl together on the 23rd of August. They walked from Tottenham High Road towards the secluded area behind the B&M car park. This is the exact same location where Levy had previously attacked a sex worker in a car park in January. They walked together out of the range of CCTV cameras, and Levy was the only one seen to return. Cheryl's body was discovered the next morning at approximately 6:30 a.m. on the 24th of August. She had been strangled to death. At sentencing, the judge said the murders were strikingly similar. Both women were found dead in almost identical positions. I think it's also worth noting at this point, it appears that the 3 sex workers that he attacked are also the only 3 women that he attempted to suffocate, 2 of which were successful and ended in death. He is arrested and eventually charged with both murders and charged with rape, intentional suffocation, inflicting grievous bodily harm, and intent against the women he attacked in January 2025. And then in February of 2026, Levy is convicted of sexual assaults against 10 women on the London Underground between 2023 and 2025, and the sexual assault of the prison officer in 2022. Then finally, just last week, on the 7th of August, he was found guilty of murdering Carmenza Valencia Trujillo and Cheryl Wilkins and violently raping the 3rd sex worker in January 2025. And just yesterday, on the 12th of August 2026, he was given a whole life sentence. After nearly a decade of being bailed out and let off time and time and time again, finally justice has been served. While he alone committed these crimes, he is not the only one with something to answer for. The Met Police, the British Transport Police, the courts, and so many other levels of our government have failed these women. If he had been arrested and actually sentenced the first time that he hurt someone, those women would never have died. 9 years of escalating offending had to go almost entirely unchecked for him to get to the point of killing 2 women. Those murders were entirely preventable by police action. After his very first assault in 2017, the Crown Prosecution Service refused to charge him. The following year, he attacks at least 2 more women. Those attacks he also doesn't see punishment for until 3 years later, in 2021, when he is charged with 3 years in prison, of which he only serves 18 months, and while serving it, he sexually assaults another woman. He is released early on licence after only 18 months, out of a 3-year sentence for multiple sexual assaults, and let me say again, having committed yet another sexual assault on camera in prison. And within 6 months, he is reported to have assaulted yet another woman. Another 6 months go by, and the police receive yet another allegation of rape. He is not charged with this rape, but he is arrested and returned to prison for breach of his license, for breach of his conditions of release. And he is ordered to remain in custody for the remainder of his sentence. which at this point only has 3 months left on it. These 3 months go by, and he is released yet again. This same month, the Met Police downgrade him from a high-risk offender to a medium-risk offender. Let me remind you that at this point, he is believed to have sexually assaulted at least 6 women. So having been released into the community yet again and downgraded from a high-risk offender to a medium-risk offender in August of 2024, by November of 2024, he is alleged to have assaulted at least 3 more women. At which point he is interviewed again by British Transport Police and again not charged. 3 months later, he violently rapes a sex worker in public in a car park in Tottenham. And days later, the police, clearly having their eye on the real dangers, managed to arrest her for breaching a community protection notice. While she is sitting in the police station under arrest for supposedly being a threat to community safety, she tells them about what he did. She tells them who he is, what he looks like, where to find him, and they do nothing with this information. And just 2 months later, he murders another sex worker. His DNA is found at the scene of the crime on a lead pipe next to her dead body, and the police do not charge him with murder. After being released for the murder that he committed, he goes on to sexually assault several more women between April and June of 2025, before killing yet another sex worker. It is not until after he has killed 2 women and sexually assaulted at least 10 before he is finally taken seriously as a threat to women by the police. If he had been forced to serve his first 3-year prison sentence in 2021 until 2024, at least 2 women would not have been sexually assaulted. If the sexual assault against the female prison officer had been taken seriously at the time and investigated, maybe his sentence would have been extended and he wouldn't have been released to sexually assault more women quite so soon. If, after releasing him from prison, early, might I add, the Met Police had decided not to downgrade him to a medium-risk offender for no reason, maybe he would have been monitored more closely. Maybe, if after his release, when he sexually assaults 3 more women and one of them catches it on camera, if he had been charged then instead of released, perhaps he would have been sat in prison last year instead of roaming the streets, murdering vulnerable women. If the police had listened and taken seriously the sex worker who he had violently raped and strangled in January 2025, just 2 months before his first murder, the woman who gave his description and his home address, perhaps they could have used that information to arrest him, if they had decided a sex worker was worthy of the same justice as everyone else. Or after finding his DNA on a lead pipe next to a dead body, they could have charged him with a first murder before he had a chance to commit a second. But no, at every step of the way, for 9 consecutive years, the police, the courts, the government failed these women over and over and over and over again. Am I glad that he has been sentenced to prison for life and he will never be able to be free to harm another woman? Yes, but this is not a win for the police. This case has been years of failure. This case is just one of many in recent years that act as proof that the police do not care about violence against women. And they certainly don't care about violence against sex workers. That shouldn't be surprising, considering it's also proof that they don't care about violence against one of their own, a female prison officer. It is clear the police needs a systemic change of attitude, a complete overhaul. Every single branch of police and government that was involved in this case needs to be thoroughly investigated. Every single time a case like this happens, we can look back to Sarah Everard not that long ago. The police say, we'll do an internal review. We'll fix it, we'll change it, we'll make it better. But cases like these just keep happening. You'll be surprised to know that internal reviews done by the police force, on the police force, rarely find wrongdoing on the part of the police force. For this reason, I think we strongly need to urge the police force and the government, in this case, to have an external review board. It is also my opinion, and I don't think it's absurd to say, that any police officer or judge who let him go after his first offence should lose their jobs. Whoever is responsible for making the decision to release him early, whoever is responsible for moving him from the high risk to the medium risk category, Every single person involved in this failing must be held accountable. We will not accept again a page of recommendations that are never implemented. We need to see change. A good legal system is one that prevents crime from happening in the first place, not one that allows it to escalate to the point of double murder. And if the police want to ensure that this doesn't happen again, they are the ones that need to make changes. The surviving victims and the deceased victims' families now finally have the closure of knowing that he will rot in prison and he will never be able to hurt another woman. However, where they don't yet have closure is in knowing that cases like this will be prevented from happening in the future. And that can only come from substantial, systematic change. Until then, we all live with the knowledge that these cases will continue to happen right under the nose of the British police.